Good morning, everybody. I'm coming to you from Coronaville, from the land of isolation, where we're all by ourselves. I'm actually in Portland, Oregon with my mom, and this is what happens when you isolate. I am in a land with no hair dryers. So if any of you remember these old goodies, oldie but a goodie, that's what I'm wearing. That's how I'm dealing with my isolation season. So we all need to be careful. We all need to stay isolated because this is what's going to happen. So it's good to see you. Good to talk with you again. Like I said, I am in Portland, Oregon at my mom's, and we felt like the Lord wanted me to come and be here with her so she wasn't alone in this season. But that decision was not an easy one to make. And I came last week and was a little uptight, to be honest with you, to get on a plane in this season of our history and fly to Portland. And so I had my mask, I had my gloves on. Didn't have my hair dryer bonnet, but I did have my mask and my gloves. But I was pretty uptight about coming. And so on the other end of my trip was going to be my niece Kendra. And so the day before I left, I was texting her and giving her the flight information. And later that night, I just felt a little uncomfortable. And I said, Kendra, I just need to ask you one more thing. So I'm just going to read you the interchange that she and I had on text so that you get the idea of how it went. This is me. Just double checking, Kendra, with you. Are you okay picking me up since I'm going to be coming off a plane with bugs and germs? Kendra says, yes, I'm totally cool with it! Exclamation point. And I'll be there! Exclamation point. And then me. And you're not worried? I just want to be sure you're not worried. Kendra says, nope, I got you, and God has me. I can't begin to tell you how comforting her words were to me. I was uptight, and she says, don't worry, Aunt Donna. I got you, and God's got me. And sometimes when we're in seasons that are scary or fearful, we know that we're supposed to hang on to God, but to have somebody come alongside and say, I got you and God's got me. Sometimes we just need that affirmation and that buddy to walk with us through coronavirus. And so Kendra was a real gift to me this week. And as I've thought about her texts over and over, I keep hearing the phrase, God's got you, God's got me, God's got all of us. None of this has taken him by surprise. So I kind of wanted to share with you a little bit of what I've been studying in the women's Bible study. We've been going through 1 Peter. But since I've been here in Portland, I jumped out of 1 Peter and went to Joshua, which is one of my favorite books. And I think probably for the women's Bible study, we'll probably go there next because I'm just loving it. And God has drawn my heart back to Joshua in need of courage at a time that he could have been really fearful. So let me read for you our passage for today, Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. A few years ago, before Pastor Jerry asked me to do the women's ministry at Northlands, I was working on a book. It was called The Distinctive Road. And what I was trying to do in the book was to highlight some of the things that I've learned along the way since Bob and I have been on the road for the last 8 years. And it was based on my study of Exodus, which led into Joshua. And one of the principles that I pulled out in that book, which I never finished, but each chapter had a principle. And the fifth principle was to walk the distinctive road, which means to walk after Jesus, to obey Jesus. When you go on this distinctive road, it always involves threat and danger. Great. Well, that's the truth. Because the way is not easy. The burden is light, but the way is difficult. Sometimes God leads us up mountains that are steep and through valleys that are scary. And so this is the reality of the Christian life. And it will always be the reality of the Christian life. Because without danger and threat, we have no need for God, we have no need to exercise faith, and we have no need to pray. If everything's taken care of, why pray? Why seek God? Why draw near? We don't need to. We're independent and we can take care of it ourselves. So God allows these difficult seasons in our lives to develop our faith. In Exodus 14:10 it says, "As Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel looked, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. And they became very frightened. So the sons of Israel called out to the Lord." God calls us. Here's some of the things he calls us to. He calls us to danger. He calls us to come and die. Great. He calls us to deny ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow him. He calls us to hard things. And sometimes, yes, God calls us to scary things. There's a book by Mark Batterson. I don't remember the name of it, and I apologize. But in the opening of it, he gives an introduction, and he uses an illustration of a group of people called one-way missionaries. The one-way missionaries, there was a gentleman by the name of A.W. Milne, and he was the one-way missionary who was going to the island of New Hebrides in the South Pacific. And he packed his bags. Well, not his bags, but he packed all of his stuff, and he put it in a coffin because he knew he would not be coming back. And they purchased just one-way tickets. They went to the land that had headhunters. So they were walking right into danger, right into scary things, right into things that would cost them absolutely everything. And he ended up ministering there for 35 years. God sometimes asks us to do those kinds of things. If you ever have the chance to get alongside missionaries, they've got stories. And it would be really encouraging to your faith to find some of those folks and ask them, what kind of hard and scary things has God asked you to do? There's an obsession that I have right now. A lot of you know that I love words. I also like oxymorons. I also like epithets. And an epithet is a description of somebody. It's a way to capture the character of somebody in a really short phrase in a real surprising way. And so right now I've kind of been honed in on epithets. So give you a couple of examples. George Washington is the father of his country. That would be an epithet. Ronald Reagan was called the Teflon president. Sports figures. Michael Jordan, Air Jordan. Wayne Gretzky, the great one. He was a hockey player. A dog? Man's best friend. And so those are epithets. Well, we have Christian ones. This A.W. Milne is called the one-way missionary. One-way missionary. Abraham is called the friend of God. Gideon, mighty man of valor. You love Gideon. David, a man after God's own heart. Barnabas, the son of encouragement. Moses, the servant of the Lord. And Joshua, interestingly enough, is called Moses' servant until the very last reference of him when he's finally called the servant of the Lord. How do you want to be remembered? What epithet do you want to characterize your life? In this intermission that we're all in with this Corona Valley that we're all in, I've been thinking about that because I want more than anything for this season that we're in, I want my life to be consistent with everything else that I've said along the way. It's really hard to do that when things are so big and scary and unpredictable and changing every day, every hour they change, and new directives and do this, don't do that. It can be difficult to be consistent in this season. And so that's really what my hope is for all of us for this season, is that we will find a way to be consistent with the calling that God's given us. When the book of Joshua opens, we find Joshua, and he's been commissioned by Moses to lead the children of Israel into the promised land. Joshua and Caleb are the only ones who survived the 40 years of wandering in the desert. And the reason they did is important, and it's important for us. Let me read to you Numbers 14:24
And it says, "But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land which he entered, and his descendants shall take possession of it." And then in Numbers 32:12, "For they, the people, did not follow the Lord fully, except Caleb and Joshua, for they have followed the Lord fully." And that's what I want for myself, for all of us at Northlands during this season, and all believers, is to follow the Lord fully in these uncertain times. Here's the interesting thing, okay? I'm not good at math, so I had to Google this. But Moses sent 12 spies into the land of Israel. Joshua and Caleb were 2 of the 12. So when the whole group came back, 10 of the spies gave a terrible report. "Don't go, there's giants in the land, they have pointy teeth, they're scary, we can't do it, there's not enough of us, there's too many of them, they have walls, we don't, we have tents, we have, the whole thing." And so they discouraged the people from taking the land that God had promised them. But it says Joshua and Caleb had a different spirit. So my question to you is, and to myself, do we want to be in the 85% who agree with one another, or do we want to be in the 15% who agree with God? That's a tough place to be because you have to stand alone. You have to be set apart. So do I want to be the person who acts like everybody else, that expected behavior, or do I want to be the exception? And if I'm the exception, guess what? I get to live an exceptional life. One full of blessing, one full of the goodness of God. Yes, there are hard things. Yes, there will be scary things. But if we're willing to be the exception, to stand up against the status quo and obey God when God asks us to do something hard, we will know God in ways that nobody else does. Are we going to focus on the obstacles in front of us, or are we going to focus on the opportunities? This season, this intermission that we're in, has given enormous opportunity to share the gospel. All you have to do is say to a grocery worker, "How are you doing today? How are you? Are you okay?" Text someone you know who's either a nurse or in the medical profession, "I'm praying for you. I'm thinking about you." Okay, this opportunity this season we're in right now, it may feel like it's full of obstacles, but it's not. The door is wide open to share the love and the care and the compassion of Christ. 1 Corinthians 4:2 says, "Let a man so consider us, as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required of stewards that one be found faithful." And that's what I want. I want my epitaph to say, "She was found faithful." I want that more than anything. We're stewards of our possessions, our finances, our time, but we're also stewards of this body. This body is not ours. It belongs to the Holy Spirit. And so as stewards, "Lord, what do you want me to do with this body?" He asked me to get that body on a plane and come to Portland in the middle of the coronavirus. I cannot begin to tell you how terrifying that was for me. But he asked me to come and take care of my mother. We've had an amazing visit. It's been so much fun. I am so glad that I didn't make the decision based on fear, but that I made it because I believe that's what God wanted. And I tried to make a decision based on faith. And we are just having the greatest time ever. The other question that I have for you is, will faith compel me, or will fear overrun me when I make these decisions? As I mentioned at the beginning, Bob and I have been on this journey on the road for the last 8 years. And the last few months, since last November, we've been planted here in Monument, or there in Monument. And all along the way, there were all these threats. Remember, I told you that the distinctive road, the road that we follow Jesus on, is full of danger and threat. Okay, so let me give you some examples of threat that I've faced in the last 8 years. We lived in the Fairfield Hotel for 6 months. The financial threat was horrendous. It was crazy. We had no business doing what we were doing, but God asked us to do it. We had a season of when we went back to the East Coast. I'm really fearful of large cities. And I thought, Lord, just don't take me anywhere scary. Don't take me anywhere big like New York City. I don't ever want to go. I can die happy and not go to New York City. Well, guess what? My oldest son and his family moved to New York City, so we ended up going there. I ended up having a great time. But there was that, there was a psychological threat attached to that because I'd worked myself all up over it. And then there was one day when we were on the subway, getting on the subway, and I had a panic attack because I got separated from my family and I couldn't find them. I couldn't find Bob. I couldn't find my son and his family. And I didn't know what to do. And I was starting to hyperventilate, and one of them came back and got me. But there's psychological fears that we face as well as financial threats. There's also physical threats. We were driving through Indianapolis one afternoon, and we got in the backwash of a tornado. And I don't know if any of you that's ever happened to before. It has never happened to me, and I lived in the Midwest, but we couldn't see. We couldn't tell. We could see just the road. We were on a freeway. We could see the freeway, but we couldn't tell where we were in this cloud burst and in this storm. So I was texting Philip, my middle son, and I said, Philip, help me. We're in the middle of a tornado. The radio's going off, and it says, seek shelter right now. Well, we couldn't even see to get off the freeway. So Philip asked me, okay, read me the signs as you're going by. So we figured out that the tornado was going north and we were going east. So we were going apart from each other. But that physical threat, that danger that we were in the middle of was absolutely terrifying. So that was a threat that God allowed. We were also in a situation of racial threat where we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And those kind of threats can be scary as well. We have physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual threats all in this coronavirus situation. That's why it's so overwhelming when you look at it. Because those of us who are struggling physically, anyone who might have corona has those threats. Those of us who are in the target zone, the 60 and above, that can be scary. So this whole coronavirus thing includes almost every kind of threat there can be. And that's why it feels so overwhelming. And that's why God says, come unto me, all who are weary and burdened, come to me, and I will give you rest. I will rest you. Come to me. Don't go to CNN. Don't go to Fox News. Don't go on the coronavirus dashboard, even though it's really cool to look at. Don't feed on that in this hour. Feed on the valley that God will take you by. He will take you by the still waters. Go there in this season. Remember I said A.W. Milne was the one-way missionary. Here's what they wrote on his tombstone in New Hebrides after he passed away. On his grave it is written, when he came, there was no light. When he left, there was no darkness. What an amazing testimony. And remember, this man was serving headhunters, people who killed every missionary who had gone before him. And he was willing to choose faith over fear. So when I was thinking about the fact that A.W. Milne, when he came, there was no light. When he left, there was no darkness. The women in Bible study know that I'll go on a word rampage. Well, that's what happened. And so I just want to share with you something that God showed me yesterday morning as I was on my little word rampage. Have you ever looked up the word corona? It's not the beer. The corona. It's from the sun. And it means that glow or that aura around the sun. It's the crust of the sun. It's called the corona. Okay, so 3 years ago, I was here in Portland, in August of 2017, and I was here for the total eclipse. Bob and I were here. And an eclipse is when a solar eclipse happens when the moon comes between the sun and the earth, and it casts its shadow, the darkest part of its shadow, back on the earth. So the earth becomes dark and covered and shadowed, right? Okay. When a full solar eclipse happens, the earth can be completely dark as night. You can't see anything. So I was in Portland and we were watching the time. Some people were watching it on TV. My mother taught me growing up, you never look at a solar eclipse because you'll go blind. And all these people are out in the park with their Walmart glasses looking at the sun. I thought, I'm not doing that. But right before it happened, I thought, I need to go out there. So I ran down the block and across the street where there's a park. And there was a whole bunch of people in the park. And as we got closer and closer to the time when the eclipse was going to happen, all of a sudden the strangest thing happened. Cars that were driving down the street suddenly stopped. People stopped talking. Birds were silent. Everything went silent. And then as the moon came between the earth and the sun and blocked the light of the sun, nobody said a word. But God did. God spoke. And he said, I made the earth by my power, and I preserve it by my wisdom. With my own understanding, I stretched out the heavens. When I speak in the thunder, the heavens roar with rain. I cause the clouds to rise over the earth. I send lightning with the rain, and releases the wind from my storehouse. We have the opportunity, just like an eclipse. We have this moon come through and it's casting its shadow on the earth. This coronavirus has come and it's cast its shadow in our hearts, in our spirits, in the people around us. My goodness, they are fearful and without hope. We can be that corona of God. We can allow that light to squeeze out behind the darkness and squeeze out and penetrate the darkness. We don't have to be captured by the darkness that's around us. We don't have to be captured by the fear. We can be that light that squeezes out and gives hope to the people who are walking in darkness, to the people who are holed up in their houses, just so afraid because they're watching and they don't know what's going to happen to them or their loved ones. Also, in that introduction to Mark Batterson's book, he said, when did we start believing that God wants us to send us to safe places, to do easy things? That faithfulness and holding the fort and that playing it safe is safe. Jesus didn't die to keep us safe. Mark Batterson says, Jesus died to make us dangerous. Ooh, okay. I think I would rather be the exception to the majority than the expected of the majority. I would rather be found faithful than be somebody who lived contrary to what God was asking of me. In this season, I would rather be faithful than be found alive. If God asked me to do something hard and it costs my life, then I would rather be faithful. I'm working on my epitaph, and I don't know what yours would be. Here's some. I haven't decided on what mine's going to be, but one found faithful, one who was the exception to the misguided majority, someone who walked with God, somebody who was dangerous. Maybe that's what I want to be. Or somebody who heard, well done, well done. Church, God's got you. God's got me. We don't need to tremble or be dismayed. He's with us. He's not forgotten you, and he knows where you are in isolation, and he knows what you look like in isolation. I miss you all. I can't wait for the day when we get back together to worship at Northlands. What a party we're going to have then. But until then, take care of each other, watch for each other, and just like my niece Kendra said, I got you and God's got me. So if you need help, reach out to somebody. You know, your strength, your faith may feel weak. God's put around us amazing. There's amazing people of faith at Northlands. Reach out to one of them, text them, email them, call them, or call one of the pastors and say, I need help. I need someone to encourage me today. I've got you. God's got me. God's got us all. It's such a privilege to be in this hour and to be light in the midst of this darkness. I love you all, and we'll see you all soon.